Hello and welcome once again to Elvis the Ultimate Fan Channel. Ron Strauss began his career as a pilot after working on C-141s during the Vietnam War as a flight engineer. He was initially hired by an airline to fly the Convair 990, but also flew the Convair 880 during jobs with different airlines in the 1970s. In 1975, Ron was hired to fly Elvis's personal Convair 880, the Lisa Marie, which he used to tour the US for 2 years before his death in 1977. Ron's life is the subject of a new book written by award-winning author Sally Hoedel. The title is Destined to Fly, From Iowa to Elvis. I'm delighted to say that Ron joins me on the show today to share his memories of working as Elvis's personal pilot. Hi Ron, you're very welcome to Elvis the Ultimate Fan Channel, and thanks for joining me today.
You're welcome. Thanks, Steve.
We were talking there just off air before we started the interview that you're in sunny Florida, is that correct?
Yes, and it's a beautiful day down here.
But it wasn't sunny a few weeks ago, was it though? There was a tornado?
Well, it was a hurricane and it wiped out southwest Florida. I lived just north of Daytona.
Were you hit badly?
No, small damages and no problem at all.
Brilliant.
None whatsoever. We lost electrics for about 2.5 days, but we had a generator, so it's no problem.
Great. Glad to hear it. So where can we start? In my intro, obviously, I said that you were Elvis Presley's pilot, but there's much more to the story in the book than just being Elvis Presley's pilot, isn't there? Could you tell our listeners a little bit about where you were born and how you got started and why you decided to become a pilot?
Well, I was born in Iowa, and then I went in the Air Force when I was 17. And I started off as a mechanic on the B-47. And then I upgraded to flight engineer on the C-141A model. And I spent, 12 years in the Air Force, 3.5 flying a 141 as a flight engineer. And then I decided to get out of the Air Force and become a pilot. So I did.
And where exactly, do you mind telling me exactly where you were born in Iowa? Maybe somebody might know the town.
It's Fonda. It's between Fonda, and it's halfway in between Storm Lake and Fort Dodge, Iowa.
Okay, so it's a small town, or what it was when you were small?
Well, it was the best population was later on, and it was like 11 or 1,200, and now it's only about 600.
Oh, so it's gone down, not up.
No, it's gone down. It was a farm community, and the farmers used to, like my grandfather farmed 160 acres with 10 children. And nowadays they farm, 4,000 acres. So the population has decreased.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So after you became a pilot, who did you fly for, or who did you pilot for before meeting Elvis Presley, or Elvis Presley giving you the job as his pilot?
Well, I flew the Convair 880, 880M, and 990 a lot, and that's how I got hired with Elvis, because he bought a Convair 880.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you often think that was it strange that Elvis bought the airplane and not just rented them?
Well, he bought the airplane because and he could rent them, that's for sure. But he wanted to do tours, and then he wanted to go to Europe, and we took him to Hawaii, and he just wanted his own airplane.
Yeah,
he didn't care what it cost, because the airplane burned about 2,000 gallons an hour. And I don't remember what back we were paying for fuel, but it was expensive.
yeah, even in those days. So tell me about the first time you got wind, if you like, that you were going to be working for Elvis.
Well, I met the broker. He was the broker that sold him the Convair, and actually he bought it from Boeing, I think. And I flew the airplane from Wichita as a passenger airplane down to Fort Worth, where we had it overhauled or put it to the specs that Elvis wanted. And that was it.
And who interviewed you for the job?
Well, the interview was the shortest one I ever had. I interviewed with his father, and Vernon Presley. And but he talked to Elvis every night. And the only reason I got hired is well, a couple reasons. One, I knew the broker. And secondly, I had a lot of Convair time.
So you knew the plane that Elvis had bought very, very well.
Well, I knew the type of airplane. I don't know. I didn't know, that particular airplane that well.
Yes.
But the type.
How did the interview go? Do you remember any questions or how it went?
Well, the interview was the shortest one, like I said, I ever had. There was two questions that Vernon Presley asked me. He said, he told me, he said two questions. One was, you fly the airplane and we'll do the entertainment. And secondly, how much money do you want to make? And I told him, and it was all exactly as I told him.
And then the first time you actually met the man himself, because actually, there's a funny story the first time you met Elvis, isn't there, because of the name you called him. Can you share with our listeners that?
Well, it was, we got hired by the Presleys, and then we went to Dallas to pick up the airplane. We flew it to Long Beach, and then we flew it to Nashville and had it certified. And then we flew it to Memphis. And we thought, well, there'd be a big crowd there with Elvis, being there. And there was nobody, nothing. And the next day we came out, and the crew, we'd done the exact same thing. We sat there all day, nothing. Elvis didn't show. And then the third day he showed. And it was really neat because, of course, I've never met the man before. And each one of us, he called out for us to come out of the cockpit one at a time. And when I met him, I said, Mr. Presley, good afternoon or morning, whatever it was. And he says, well, I guess, he was sitting, on the back of the chairs in the airplane. And he says, oh, I guess I know who you are. Or he says, I guess you know who I am. And I said, yes, sir, Mr. Presley. And he says, none of this sir stuff, none of this Presley stuff. Yeah. He says, may I call you Ron? And I said, yes, sir. And he says, look, I told you none of this yes, sir stuff. and that's the way it was. It was Elvis and Ron from then on in.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, we know as fans that, Elvis that's the way he was. He didn't like the formalities, and he didn't like to be, any better than anybody else. He just wanted to be known as Elvis, didn't he?
Yes, very true.
Even though in reality, he was your boss. He didn't want you sort of standing on ceremony or anything like that.
He was very uneasy about flying.
Yeah.
I guess he had some problems early on.
Well, he had a major scare in 1956 coming back or going to a recording session. It was a light aircraft, and I think it put the frighteners on him for a while, but he never really flew again in the 60s, and then he began flying again obviously in the 70s when the tour started again.
Yeah. He came to the cockpit, numerous times, but one time, it was right at the start, he came to the cockpit and he says, hey, look, don't do anything that you're uncomfortable with, maintenance-wise or whatever, the weather, he says, because I can get other airplanes, no problem at all. And he told us that right up the front. And we had weather a couple times, and he just bounced back, no problem.
Did he ever take the controls of the Lisa Marie? That's one of the questions I wanted to ask.
I asked him, hey, do you want to take controls of this? No, he says, that's what I hire you guys for. So then I was talking to ATC, of course, and he said, ATC said, well, is Elvis really own that airplane? I said, yes, he does. And I say, he's right here in the cockpit. You want to talk to him? And Elvis keyed the mic. I handed the mic to him, keyed the mic, and talked to him a couple minutes.
Yeah.
And they got a big thrill out of that.
Yeah, you can imagine. You can imagine. Tell me about this fool's gold story has been misreported over the years, but you knew it firsthand, so you can tell us the truth about this fool's gold story and the sandwiches. Can you share that with us now?
For sure, no problem. Whatever year birthday it was Lisa Marie's, his daughter's, I don't know, 7th or 8th or 9th birthday. So we were going to fly to Denver and then drop her off in Long Beach, LA area. And so we took off, and like I said, it was her birthday. And we had the Fool's Gold manager brought out a birthday cake, or we brought one on the airplane. I'm not sure how that went. And of course, we landed in Denver, and they had the Fool's Gold sandwiches, and they were peanut butter and jelly and all kinds of stuff in it, and it was just too sweet for me. And of course, I only took a couple bites, and then that was it. And I think the sandwiches back then were $28 a piece,
wow.
And that was, of course, delivered.
Yeah.
Then we sang "Happy Birthday" to Lisa Marie, and I bet you can't tell who the lead singer was on that one.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, we were checking the weather in the Los Angeles area, and it was 0-0. I mean, the visibility was nothing. And so we invited Elvis into the cockpit, and we said, hey, Elvis, we'll go, but we're not going to get in, and we'll hold as long as we can. Go. And says, well, we'll go, but diverting with you on the airplane is a real pain in the tail. Just wait a minute. Let me see what's going to happen. So he went back and talked to some of these friends, and they wanted to go to, I think it was New Orleans. It was in Louisiana. And he came back to cockpit, and he said, well, I'm going to send security with Lisa into the hotel, and then when it gets better weather, we'll go in. And so we figured we'd just go back to Memphis. Then he says, well, go to New Orleans. And we did. We took off, and the weather was good in New Orleans, and we went there, and Elvis was in the cockpit in his jumpsuit, and he wanted to see the landing, and that was okay with us, no problem. So he was sitting in the jump seat, and we landed, and I'd never been there with him aboard before. And I asked him, I says, hey, where do we get some fuel? He says, well, try that gas station, FBO over there, Texaco or Chevron or whatever it was. Said, okay. So we taxied over there, and this young manager came up. He was probably 30 years old, and he came right in the cockpit, and what do you guys? And Elvis was in the jump seat. I says, how about fuel? How much you want? I said, I don't know, probably about 5,000 gallons.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, well, who the hell is going to pay for that? And I pointed back at Elvis, said, that guy right back there. Oh, my God, he says, Elvis Presley. And he shook his hand, of course, numerous times. And he says, my wife is in love with you. Can she meet you if she comes out here? Absolutely, no problem. So we told the manager, we were dragging our feet. We were hoping that she would, come out here immediately, but I guess she didn't. And of course, this was like just and she was probably sleeping in the bed. So pretty soon, the head of security came up, said, hey, do we have a maintenance problem? Said, no, it just takes a while because of the, diverting over. And So then we taxied out, and as we're taxiing out, here comes this girl.
Oh, no.
And she's waving, stop, stop, stop. Well, hell, we ain't going to stop. We're heading for Memphis. So off we went to Memphis. That's the story of the Fool's Gold.
Yeah, but I'm that obviously I feel sorry for the young lady that wanted to meet Elvis. She probably regretted stalling or not getting out of bed quick enough for the rest of her life. But the main thing, yeah,
you're laying in bed and you put your makeup on or what?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Who knows?
But what I was going to say was I'm glad you've clarified the Fool's Gold story, because it's been misreported for so long in the press that, Elvis just flew there just for his own, to satisfy himself and, for gluttony and all this. And they say that in the press when really it was a party for his daughter. There was more than himself, obviously. There was, I don't know. Do you remember how many were there?
Oh, I don't. The airplane, when he got done, it was what was originally was Delta Airlines passenger airplane, and it would probably carry 120 or thereabouts. When he got done, reconfigured it, it would only carry 29. And I don't remember how many people was on it.
But it was more than just Elvis flying there just so he could have a Fool's Gold. It was his daughter's birthday.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then, and there was, probably 10 or 15 people. I don't remember exactly how many people was on board. But lots of times we just didn't even know who was on the airplane. The flight attendant would come up and say there's 29 people or 20 X amount of people, and that's what we put on the weight and balance, and that was it, and off we'd go.
Tell me the story about. I just want to make that your late wife was called Betty. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, sadly, Betty died a few years ago. Is that correct?
Just about 10 years ago.
Yeah. But there was a story that you wanted to, when you were taking Elvis to Hawaii in 1977, and you wanted Betty to come along as well, and there was a mix-up. Is that correct?
Well, I'll tell you the story, and there was a mix-up. But I found out that, Elvis, months before that, asked us, says, hey, will this airplane make Hawaii? And I told him, absolutely, no problem at all. We got plenty of reserve, no problem. So, months later, we get this call from Joe Esposito, and we're going to go to Hawaii, whatever day it was. And so I said, oh, well, I'd like to take my wife. And he says, well, let me tell you, on the 29 seats, there's 4 open seats in Memphis, but we're going to stop in Oakland for fuel. And the airplane is booked all over. Mm-hmm. In fact, there's going to be more people booked than we got capabilities of carrying. And I said, are you sure of that, Joe? And he says, oh, yeah. All right. So off we go without Betty, and we're going to out of Memphis to Oakland, picking up fuel. And we got 4 open seats. And I'm madder than hell, but, I'm not going to let that on. I mean, I'll catch it next time.
Yeah.
So then we take off with 4 open seats. Elvis comes in the cockpit. Hey, how's it going? And I said, good. The weather's good. We'll be there in a couple of hours or so. And he says, Ron, I understand you're a little bit, I won't use the word he used, but ticked off.
Yeah.
And I said, no, Elvis, maybe next time. No, he says, you don't understand me. He says, Betty should be on this flight. Yeah. And I said, no, don't worry about it. He says, well, I do worry about it. He says, let me ask you something. He says, do I pay you enough? I says, yes, sir. He said, I told you none of that sir stuff. It's Elvis and Ron. And I said, that's good. And he says, do you like working for me? Absolutely, Elvis. And he says, let me tell you, if she's not out here tomorrow, I'll replace her. And I wasn't going to take the chance. It was all on him. He said it. First class airline ticket from Memphis to Honolulu.
Yeah.
And So I did. I called as soon as we landed. I called Betty, and I says, "Hey, Elvis is paying for everything, first class airline tickets." She walked down to Memphis, or drove down to Memphis International, got a first class ticket. I wish I'd have kept it. I don't know how much it cost today. He came out to Honolulu, and we spent 3 or 4 days, and then she had to get back because of the 2 kids and their job.
Mm.
And so she airlined first class back, no problem at all. And then, I don't know, 5 or 6 days later, we came back, and Elvis, halfway to Oakland, Elvis came in and said, "Hey, Ron, did Betty enjoy her stay?" And then we get back to Memphis, and I never did talk to Elvis about money, never, or dealings. I always made a habit to talk with Vernon. And I had a stack of bills from the trip, and I gave them to Vernon. And I said, "Here's, this bill is approved," and et cetera. And then when we got done with that, I had this airline ticket, and I was sort of reluctant, and I gave it to Vernon, and I said, "Hey," he said to Nancy, "Just pay him, write him out a check." And I said, "But Mr. Presley, don't you want to look at that a little bit?" "No," he says, "I talked to Elvis. He told me all about it." "No problem. Just pay him." And they gave me a check, and that was it.
Yeah, it's just, again, the generosity of Elvis Presley. I mean, there's so many examples, but that's just a beautiful example. And, I'm sure Betty had great memories about that trip. I'm sure you did as well.
Oh, I did. And in fact, he took Ginger Alton, and I met her just in Memphis, I guess, within a year. And she recognized me. I'm surprised after all these years that she would.
I spoke to Ginger on this channel. I interviewed her about a year ago, and a lovely lady, a really lovely lady. I can see what Elvis saw in her.
Elvis had numerous girlfriends, but there was very nice Linda Thompson.
Yeah, tell me about Linda giving you a kiss and Elvis warning you. I remember that from the book.
It was pretty neat because Elvis he enjoyed it a lot. But anyway, I hadn't seen Linda in probably a month or whatever it was. I don't know. And she came in the cockpit. They always came in the cockpit if they were joyriding, except after a concert. Sometimes Elvis didn't want to come in because he was just exhausted after a concert.
Yeah.
So anyway, they came in the cockpit, and I was doing some paperwork or whatever, and I turned around and my mouth just dropped open because here's this beautiful blonde, and she was dressed in a American Native outfit, of course, blonde hair, suntan skin, and a feather in her hair, and my mouth just dropped. And Elvis looked at me and shook his finger. He says, "Ron, don't even, I won't use the word, think about it." And that was fine. And then we took off, went someplace. And then when we landed, Linda and Elvis would always come in the cockpit and say, "Hey, do you need anything?" or whatever. And then she would kiss each, the 2 pilots and the flight engineer on the cheek. And she kissed the engineer on the cheek, and then she went to kiss me on the cheek. She whispered in my ear, "Ron, don't give up. You still got a chance." and I thought that was pretty cute.
Yeah. I mean, I think her and Elvis shared the same sort of humor. That's why, they lasted as long as they did, because they had that sort of wicked sort of sense of humor. Both of them did.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Elvis's bed. What happened about Elvis's bed, Ron? Are you going to come clean about this?
Yeah. It was many a times when we would get a call from somebody and they said, "Get out the airplane." Now, Elvis never airplane, well, unless on concert, but normally 2 or 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, he would somebody would call us, get out the airplane, we're going. Where are we going? I don't know. Well, Elvis will make that decision. And we would stand by for just until sunrise. And then if Elvis didn't show at sunrise, we'd leave. So that just happened numerous times. And one time we were out there, and the flight engineer, the other pilot, and the flight attendant, they all had seats or beds that or the couches or whatever they slept on. And they were all done. I sound asleep. The time I got done, the only bed that was open was Elvis's. So I said, well, heck with it. I'll just go back there and pull the covers up and flip off my flying boots, and that'll be it. And security always would show before Elvis showed, just check and make sure that everything was all right.
Yeah.
And then I think it was Dick Grobe. I was sound asleep. He woke me up. What the hell are you doing sleeping in Elvis's bed? And I says, well, I was sound asleep until you rudely awakened me.
Yeah.
And he says, you better get up to the cockpit because Elvis is on his way. That's all right. So Elvis, after we landed, we took off and went someplace. And then Elvis came in the cockpit and he says, hey, thanks. He says, hey, Ron, I understand you got in a little bit of trouble. I said, yeah, Elvis, I got caught sleeping in your bed. He says, Ron, you can sleep in my bed anytime you want. So that was pretty good.
Fantastic. Touring overseas, Elvis was definitely making plans to fly the Lisa Marie to Europe and the UK, yes?
Yes, he was. And he asked us, he says, can we fly to Europe? And I says, absolutely, no problem. The longest leg is Hawaii trip, and no problem. But he was definitely planning on the following year to go to Europe.
It's probably 1978.
Probably.
The rumors so forth about the colonel not being able to travel outside of America. Was that ever? Did you know about that prior to Elvis's death? About Colonel Parker? No,
I didn't.
Yeah, he'd obviously made plans to get around that. Obviously, Elvis had made plans to get around that if he was, planning on going in 1978. During the time you were working with Elvis, was there ever a time when you thought, he's not in the best of health? Did you see a change in Elvis maybe the last few months of his life?
Well, he put on some weight. There's no question about that. But he'd stand in the cabin door there, and he had such big shoulders anyway. So, I except for the weight wise, we never found anything different than Elvis. He was friendly, like he always was, and etc.
So August the 16th was obviously a shock for you then.
Oh, absolutely. Because I was at the mansion when he died, because I was talking, Elvis had a bunch of go-karts. He had some wicked go-karts. And I asked Elvis, I says, hey, do you mind if we drive those once in a while? No, he says, you can drive it all you want. So I had a meeting with Vernon Presley on different things. We were going to Portland, Maine that night. And so I went out and I was racing these go-karts. And like I said, they were wicked. And so then I decided, well, it's probably time to give that up. I got to go home and get some sleep. And I did. And as I was walking or getting in my car in the mansion, I saw Vernon Presley, and I think it was Nancy, his secretary or whatever it was, escorting him into the mansion. And I thought, he's not in that good a shape. He wasn't physically in that good a shape anyway. And then I went home, and my daughter's just crying big time. She says, Elvis died. I said, no, that was his father. Well, I was wrong again.
Mm-hmm. And what about the days after? Did you go back up to Graceland? Were you there for the funeral, or did you just stay away because of the amount of people that were there?
No, the funeral and the funeral procession.
Uh-huh.
And it was funny because I still got this Corvette. I bought it with the tips he gave me. And I paid $5,250 for the vet. And I bought it just down from Elvis Presley Boulevard on a used car lot. And I had looked at it numerous times, and he just was wanting $5,500, and I wasn't going to pay it. Anyway, I drove that in Elvis's first funeral procession.
Right.
And we went through, saw the coffin and everything like that. We were invited to the funeral. And then we went through the coffin and all that stuff, and different people were singing. And then we got ready to go on the funeral procession, and I was supposed to get in one of the cars. And the highway patrol came up to someone and said, "Who owns that yellow Corvette?" And they pointed to me. And I thought, "Oh, what did I do? I ain't done nothing wrong," And the policeman or the state patrol says, "Do you own that yellow vet?" I said, "Yeah." And he says, "Would you mind driving that in the funeral procession?" And I says, "No, but why?" And he says, "We want you to be the very last car."
Yeah.
Because there was tens of thousands of people lined the streets. And I said, "Yeah, no problem. Be more than glad." So I was the very last car in the funeral procession, and I still own the car. Still got it today.
You still got it today? Wow.
Yes, I do.
Wow.
It's parked in my garage,
and
I drive it on good days.
And it's on the cover of Sally Hoedel's book as well, I believe, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Did Elvis make a joke about when he first saw the Corvette? Did he?
He did. He says, "Well, I parked the car because we never did know when Elvis was going to show. So I parked it near the Corvette or the Convair, and Elvis came up, and finally he got there, and he's looking at. I think we were waiting for one of the security guards or something, and he says, "Well, I don't reckon that Corvette." He says, "Who owns that?" And I said, "I do." He says, "I must pay you enough." But anyway, on the funeral procession, it was pretty neat because, like I said, I was the last car in the funeral procession. And then there was a cop car right behind me. And after the first funeral procession, we were supposed to go by the mansion and have coffee and donuts or whatever. And so as the funeral was over, the state patrol car started leaving, and he's got his light and sirens on, and I just pulled right behind him. And off we go. We have motorcycle escorts and everything. And we're driving 70, 80 miles an hour down Memphis, whatever it was. And my wife says, "Ron, I don't think we should be here." And I says, "Well, what do you mean?" And she says, "Well, when you get time, you look in the rear view mirror. There's nobody behind us." I thought, that's interesting. So I did. I looked in the mirror. We were going down Memphis, just lickety split, 70, 80, 90 mile an hour.
Uh-huh.
And then we missed a turnoff to the mansion. And I thought, oh, we're in trouble, big trouble. But we're just going to the airport. The guy jumps out with security and jumps on this King Air and heads off. So I asked the Memphis Aero people, I said, "Who in the hell was that?" And he said, "That was the governor of Tennessee." So that's it.
In the years after Elvis died, of course, that was probably the end of your employment with the Presleys. Is that correct? Did Vernon address the issue after Elvis died with you?
Well, I got hired with the airlines right after that happened. And I was going back. I went off to Vernon, it was a couple of 3 weeks after the funeral, and I told him, I was going back with the airlines, and he said, no. He says, I want you to work here at least a year, and I'll pay you the regular amount. And I says, Mr. Presley, I'm not going to work here. If you send me a check, I'm going to tear it up. I said, that's just not the way I work.
Mm.
And I did. I went back with the airlines.
And then, when do you mind me asking, when did you retire, Ron?
I retired in 2003.
So it was quite a while after Elvis died before you retired then?
Well, yes. I went back with the airlines, and then I flew for them until 88. And then I went with UPS and got hired with the initial cadre, and then retired in 2003. And
unfortunately, your wife got sick, did she?
Yes, she did. She wasn't in the best of health, but she died. It'll be 10 years in this December.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then you moved to Florida for your retirement. Is that correct?
No. Well, I moved to Florida. There was a spot open in Florida in 85. And right. We moved back to Florida in 85. And
what do you do with yourself these days in your retirement, the man of leisure?
Well, I'm into antique cars.
Oh, right.
I got a 57 Chevy, and I got a 65 Mustang, and of course I got the 73 Corvette. And I keep playing with those periodically.
I'd say you and Elvis had quite some conversations then about cars, because we know that Elvis was into cars as well.
He was into cars and guns, and I'm into cars and guns.
What about that time he was on the plane and you noticed a gun in his holster? That was a very funny conversation you had about that as well, wasn't it?
Well, when he was just out playing around, he would carry I think it was a 45 pistol in his belt. And so I quizzed him about it. I says, Elvis, is that 45 real? And he says, you bet it is. I says, is that loaded? And he says, what else? Why carry a gun if it's not loaded?
Yeah.
And I says, if that gun goes off, we're in deep trouble. He says, you worry about the flying, I'll worry about the gun. And that was it.
Yeah, that sounds like Elvis, doesn't it?
Yeah. He was just a fantastic guy to work with. Fantastic. I mean, he would just give us anything we wanted. The gifts he gave us, I still got the gold necklace that he gave me. And it wasn't, like just throwing it on your lap or something like that. He made a statement, whatever it was, I can't remember. And then he put it on your necklace, or on your neck, around your head and on your neck. And I still got that. And the Elvis jacket that he gave me.
You took something else as well, if I remember rightly from the book. Was it a comb or something you took?
Well, after, we went to the airport after the funeral, and then we went on to the airplane to check things out, make sure it was all right. And my wife had one of Elvis's uniforms. And was going to take that. And I said, no, put that back. We ain't going to take that. So she went back and found a comb in his bedroom. And I still got it.
Yeah.
And I display it sometimes, but I've got to be very careful because I don't want to lose it.
Yeah, of course. I'm sure you treasure that as much as all the other things. Yeah. So, Ron, the book is Destined to Fly, the story of pilot Ron Strauss from Iowa to Elvis by Sally Hoedel. Now, we know that Sally's first book was Destined to Die Young, and that was, and that's how you came to meet Sally, I believe, wasn't it?
Well, it was. I used to take my RV and go to Cadillac, Michigan, and for the summers, because the summers down here are very hot.
Yeah.
And that's where I met her. I met her at an Elvis impersonator, an ETA, whatever you want to call him, in Traverse City. and that's where I met her. And Jake Slater, which is the ETA, and boy, is he good.
Yeah.
Really good.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some really good ETAs around. The ones, the ones that do it with respect and don't try and be Elvis, but just sort of pay tribute to Elvis are definitely the best ones.
I think so.
Yeah. Okay, that's great, Ron. It's been an absolute pleasure spending this half hour or so with you and reminiscing about Elvis. There is obviously a lot more in that book, and I've read the book, obviously, because Sally sent it to me before I made this phone call to you, and I read it, and it's a really, really good book. And the previous book as well, Destined to Die Young, was a very, very good book as well. I'm just wondering what Sally's got lined up for the next book, what she's got destined for.
Well, it'll be destined something. And I asked her about that. She says it's a secret.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
yeah.
But she's a excellent writer.
Yes.
I mean, absolute excellent. And a nice person. Very nice person. Big Elvis fan.
Yeah. Well, I was one of the first people, if not the first person actually, to interview Sally when Destined to Die Young was coming out. And as you say, she's a very, very fine lady. Ron, I'm going to let you go because I appreciate you giving your time to speak to me and the fans. Okay, thanks, Ron, and take care of yourself.
All right, Steve, you be careful. Bye.
Thanks once again to Ron for sharing his memories of his time with Elvis. For more information on how to buy Sally's book, please visit www.elvisauthor.com. If you're in the UK, visit www.strictlyelvis.net. This will save you on international shipping. I will drop these two links in the description box below also. Thanks for listening, and I hope you can join me next time on Elvis the Ultimate Fan Channel.